Okay, so when most students who are new to painting with watercolors get started, they oftentimes wonder, where's the white paint? Well, in traditional watercolors, white paint is not used, generally speaking. White is more opaque, and one of the benefits of using watercolors is the fact that they're transparent. So if you want to lighten something, then you've got to use more water to thin it out. More water will make your paint lighter, it'll make the colors less intense, it'll make them more transparent. If you have less water and more paint, your colors are going to be darker, more intense, more vibrant, and more opaque. So generally speaking, we want to err on the light side when using watercolors and to take advantage of that transparent quality. If you want something that's more bright, more vibrant, more opaque, a thicker, heavier paint would suit you better in that case. In that case, you'd want to use acrylic paint. So let's get started. If you're right-handed, like I am, you want to work from left to right across your paper and from the top down, obviously, so you don't put your hand in wet paint. If you're left-handed, you'd work from right to left. You want to make sure you don't put your water on one side of your painting and your paint on the other, so that you're not taking your brush over top of your work and risking dripping it. I've got three faint shapes drawn here. You want to draw lightly, draw lightly, draw lightly. Hopefully you can see those. I'm going to try to demonstrate very quickly three different techniques that you can use. The first technique is going to be wet on wet. Wet on wet means that you're simply going to take your brush, get it wet, get it damp, and then you're going to go ahead and apply water, just water, to the area that you want to paint. And I'm sure we've all experienced at some point in our lives when a color, like food coloring for instance, is dropped into a liquid. What happens to that color? It disperses throughout the liquid. It goes from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. So you may or may not be able to see that on the camera. There you can see it, the light reflecting on the water. But I'm just laying down a thin coat of water on my paper. Typically when you're adding water to your brush, you don't want to put too much in the brush. So just dipping the tip of it is often going to be just enough. Alright, so let's see what happens now. I've got my shape colored in, so to speak, with plain water. Now we're going to add color on one side of the shape. Let's use red for instance. See what happens here. I'm just going to touch it over here and you can see that starts to bleed and disperse all on its own. And I can see right now I'm not going to be happy with these sets of watercolors. Oh well, we'll roll with it. I'm going to take a little more red into my brush, dip it back up there. Remember that in this project we want to have colors transition within each of our shapes. So you can see this color is going to spread out wherever I had water. It'll stop wherever the wet edge ends. So that's important to keep in mind, where that wet edge is. And I can go back to my water, just dipping the very tip of it in, pick up a little more paint, and I'm going to keep going with red up on this edge, and then remember we want to transition, so I'm going a little bit darker in the one corner. You can see I'm just kind of barely touching the brush to the paper. I rinse that red out of my brush, touch it to my paper towel like so. And then we're going to pick up another color. Let's go with orange. I could use yellow if I wanted. I'm going to go with a little bit of orange. Put that in here and oh my goodness, these colors are going to be terrible. I'm sorry. I might see if I can actually return them. We'll see. That's not a very vibrant orange by any means. So you see I'm going to pull some of that color up, go back to my orange, and go right back in. I've already got water on the paper, remember, so I don't have to add a whole lot. You are sort of working against the clock with this method in the sense that that water that we added is drying this whole time. So something like so. So that's the wet on wet method. I'm going to overlap. Watercolors are water soluble, meaning they dissolve in water, even after they're dry. So if I don't like an area, I can go back and lighten it by adding more water. Let's say I've got way too much color down here in the corner, which I don't think I do right now, but imagine I did. You could use a technique called lifting, where you take something absorbent, in this case a paper towel, and you just place it, as long as the paint is wet, place it over the paper, and you can lift that color right out. It's sort of like erasing. You won't get all of the color out. Now just to make that transition a little bit more intense, I'm going to go back, grab a little red. I didn't add water to this, so that's why the intensity is picking up a little bit. I'm going to add a little red and pull some of that into the orange. And you don't want to overwork your paper, especially if you've got a lot of water on it, because the fibers will loosen up and eventually kind of tear if you're not careful. But you'll notice we're going for a gradual transition in color here, from red to a red orange to red. You can make the transition whatever you want. Red to red orange, red all the way to orange. It's your call. Red through orange to yellow, that'd be 2 transitions. Alright, so that's wet on wet. The second technique that I want to show you real quick is simply laying down color on one side, laying down color on the other side, and then mixing them in the middle. So I'm going to clean my brush out and go back to, let's go red. I'll lay this down a little thicker, a little heavier. That's a little too much. That's more than what I want. So I'm going to add just a little more water. A little bit goes a long ways. So on this technique, the paper is dry. So the paint will go on a little bit more thickly perhaps. Also dry a little quicker. So there's red on one side. Rinse out my brush. Go to the orange. I'm going to lay down some orange on this side. And again, I'm working faster than what I would expect you guys to. Once you get the hang of it, after you practice this a little bit, you can probably go a little faster too. We want to be mindful of our edges. So I'm going to pull the orange toward the red. And where they meet here, I'm going to just go back and forth. And maybe you can see with my damp brush, it's got a little bit of water in it, I'm softening that red pigment, that red paint, and pulling that into the orange. Now here's something to keep in mind with any painting. A darker color is going to influence a lighter color a lot quicker than the other way around. So if I pull red into orange, orange is going to change more quickly than if I add orange to red, if that makes sense. So adding a darker color is always going to cause a quicker change when I'm adding a darker color to a lighter color than vice versa. So that's another technique. Applying color on one side, applying color on the other side, and then pulling the two together to meet in the middle. Okay, now the next trick that I want to show you, the next technique I want to show you is going to come in handy later on in the year. Both first semester and second semester. And I'll call that side to side and top down. This one's kind of one side, other side, mix them in the middle. This is wet on wet. This is going to be mixing a color. In this case I'm going to use red. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to pull some red up into the tray. Notice this is where we want to mix our color. In the tray, not down here where the colors are. So I'm going to add some water to that tray. add some paint to it. And I want to try to have enough paint here that I can cover my whole shape. Now, I'm holding the paper vertically. It's going to be like so. The reason why you want to hold it vertically is so that as you paint your shape, the pigment, the water kind of settles towards the bottom of your brush stroke. So you notice I'm going top down and side to side, and I want to have enough water in my brush with color in it that I can maintain what I call a wet edge. Can you see how that's darker toward the bottom? And you can cover a very large area with this technique. That's the advantage. But it requires holding the paper vertically and careful attention to how much water and how much pigment you have, so I maintain a wet edge. As long as I maintain a wet edge, I'll get a pretty uniform color. I won't see streaks or lines there. So I've got a little bit of a dip in this shape. Kind of comes to an end on this side. So I'm going to pull that excess water over here to this side. And now, if I want to create a transition, if I just kept doing this, I could add water. That would lighten, it would thin down the pigment as I go down. I could add water. Or I'm going to go back to the color that I mixed and add some orange. Have to be careful not to put too much water on this wet edge, or what will it do? It's going to run down. I'll get a drip. So you can see not only did I lighten that color with orange, but I've also got less pigment. So I'm going to add some more orange. See if I can't increase the brightness or intensity of that. So as we come down, we're maintaining a wet edge. It's kind of a fun technique. It's relaxing and it's fun to just watch the color get laid down nice and evenly. You'll notice wherever I place the brush, the pigment kind of runs with it, flows with it. You see that little extra pigment there? It's a little darker. I'm tapping the brush on my paper towel to dry the brush out, and then your brush can act almost like a mop, just like we used a paper towel before to lift color off the paper. I can use the brush to do that as well. Remember, liquids are going to go from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. So that's 3 techniques for you. The wet on wet, the dry brush method where we put color on one side, a different color on the other side, mix the two toward the middle, and then of course we've got this side to side, top down method where we really concentrate on maintaining a wet edge as we work our way down. So give those 3 techniques a try, see what you like the best, and as long as you concentrate and stay focused, I think you'll get good results. Oh, I wanted to show you one more thing. This is masking tape. This is why it's called masking tape. It masks off or protects the paper. So we won't necessarily use that on this project, but some of you asked if you could cover up the paper, paint over the whole thing, and then peel up whatever your negative space design would be. That would be an example of one technique that someone could use, but that would be a pain in the butt to try to mask off all your white spaces. It's great for keeping margins nice and clean and sharp. Alright, that's that. Thanks much. Good luck.